all the FDA wants you to do is to call your shots before you make them. They're cool if you miss them. They don't mind if you miss a few baskets. Just say, I want to make this basket this way. And you shoot it and you miss. And you're like, I wrote down that one didn't work. We're going to make the basket this way now. And if that one works, they're really proud of you for like writing down your plan, testing against that plan, and then pivoting when you need to pivot and you found a better way, right? So many engineers, especially in software as well as in like mechanical engineering space, can get bogged down just solving their niche problem that's in front of them that moment. And then, you're cutting your way through a forest of trees. You cut down the tree in front of you only to realize the one behind it's way bigger.
Sometimes I have this conversation with management, engineering management, and they're like, we care about quality, but we want to be fast. And like, that's a very common conversation with quality, because quality is always seen as slowing you down. And I say, well, listen, the fastest way you can do this is how we did it back in college. You just submit to production.
Yeah.
Just like do a commit to production. That is the fastest way. Do you want to do that?
This goes.
Welcome to the Hardtech Podcast.
And everyone, welcome back to the Hardtech Podcast. I'm your host, DeAndre Harakas, with my usual suspect, Grant Chapman.
How's it going, everybody?
And we have a very special guest with us, Ashkon Rasooli, the founder and CEO of EnGenius Solutions. He's been all over the space, from corporate to startups, all in the world of medical device. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, DeAndre. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here with you guys.
Yeah, no, it's been super fun. I always like talking to people that have played in more than one seat in the game, because you can talk from both sides of the table, because there's always a balance to all things, whether it is engineering and marketing and regulatory and engineering. Like, there are two sides to every coin, and talking with someone else who gets to sit on more than one side of the table helps dig out the nuance on all the ways you balance those choices.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, it is an extremely underrated quality of one's career to have actually experienced multiple roles.
Yeah. Now, being yelled at helps you yell at other people, I think. knowing what's effective and what's just hurtful.
Sure. And then for the listeners as well, would love to just hear your journey and from where you started out into now with running EnGenius.
Oh yeah, for sure. So, I've always loved just coding and software. And so I started out even as a computer science major, then found biomedical engineering, kind of made my way in there. But even in biomedical engineering, I ended up focusing on software. So I was coding for like medical applications. I was doing signal processing. And so my very first roles in the industry were, engineering, doing coding, algorithm development, and then doing testing. And from testing, I made my way into quality management systems. I enjoyed the aspect of quality management systems that is very end-to-end and big vision in terms of just touching base with every step of product development. It's a really nice big picture role. You get to, starting from ideation, engage with product management all the way down to like post-market surveillance and customer service. So here's an idea we thought about, and here's how it turned out in real world. Quality has a touch point with every step. So I like that about it. I did at some point also dabble in product management. I think quality management system does actually lend itself well to product management. But, putting all that aside, I think I ended up picking quality management system kind of as my focus because of that, just because it's very broad and it actually gives you a good big picture of how to go about software development lifecycle. I think looking around, I think I belong to a very small niche group of people. There's already a niche group of people that are at this intersection of regulatory and software in the first place.
Yeah.
But even within that, people that have kind of tried on the different roles, there's a very small number of people that, because it helps you then intimately understand for each role, what are my goals, what are my drivers. It actually helps you facilitate as a quality management system person working with that role, because you know what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, you're trying to convince them to eat their veggies and write it down first, or at least right after they did it, write it down, which no one wants to do. All engineers just want to jump in, go to the dessert and the whipped cream and the cherry and be like, I want to print this, I want to run this code, let's go test this, can we put this in front of users, let's go. But the beauty of a quality system is it makes you take a step back, like you said, and look at the whole picture. My favorite way to understand is like, all the FDA wants you to do is to call your shots before you make them. They're cool if you miss them. They don't mind if you miss a few baskets. Just say, I want to make this basket this way. And you shoot it and you miss. And you're like, I wrote down that one didn't work. We're going to make the basket this way now. And if that one works, they're really proud of you for like writing down your plan, testing against that plan, and then pivoting when you need to pivot and you found a better way. And what most people, I think, like misguided about why quality exists is, yes, it exists to make sure we make the same thing every time. It also exists to make sure we're thinking about the problem in a rational way from the big picture, right? So many engineers, especially in software as well as in like mechanical engineering space, can get bogged down just solving their niche problem that's in front of them that moment. And then, you're cutting your way through a forest of trees. You cut down the tree in front of you only to realize the one behind it's way bigger. You're like, oh, I should have turned 100%. Right back there.
And I sometimes have this conversation with engineering management, and they're like, we care about quality, but we want to be fast. And like, that's a very common conversation with quality, because quality is always seen as slowing you down. And I say, well, listen, the fastest way you can do this is how we did it back in college. You just submit to production.
Yeah.
Just like do a commit to production. That is the fastest way. Do you want to do that?
This goes.
And we'll see how this goes. And when you say it like that, at least what you get a concession out of people is, okay, the fastest way isn't the best way. Even like in terms of like speed, when you look at the overall end to end, including post-market maintenance that you need to do, the work you're gonna have to do to make up the upfront quality assurance you didn't is gonna be orders of magnitude bigger.
Yeah.
And so there's a happy medium.
Could you give us an example of that?
Oh, 100%. I mean, when you think about the quality assurance process for software, it starts with like a simple code review, static analysis. You got your system testing, integration testing, detailed testing. All of that is essentially, I think of it as a funnel that keeps mitigating, not eliminating. It is almost impossible to push software without bugs. It even goes back to the definition of what a bug is in the first place. But it mitigates how many bugs can go out. I think something like 40% of bugs start at the very first step, which is requirement definition. Mm-hmm. So the very first step of software development, which is a part of quality assurance, is requirement definition. If someone actually took the time, accurately defined the requirements, went through a process where the different stakeholders looked at it and made sure they fully understood what it meant, how to test it, they wouldn't then expose themselves to this crunch time testing scenario, high stress,
and when bug finding. Right.
This is, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the bug finding adventure. Instead of fixing them, you're like, wait, I fixed a bug and I found 5 more hiding under the rug that one was hiding under. Right.
That's not even the worst scenario. The worst scenario is you push to prod, and next thing you know, the entire system is down because you asked for a specific example, you didn't check backward compatibility.
Right.
Right.
Someone else is running an older version and the thing just crashes.
Yeah, so next thing you know, you got a flood of customer complaints coming in saying your app is just not loading. Why? Because during the deployment process, nobody documented all the needs for backward compatibility correctly.
Right. No, and this is that whole basically user needs to input requirements to design outputs to verification to validation, like that waterfall effect that everyone associates waterfall with a really slow or bad design cycle. And the way I always liken this to people is well, you can go through the right cycle once, or we can do it twice or 3 times, or however many times it takes you to do this pure agile to get it right. Because there's certain things that is impossible to do without some gates and some reviews and some structure of how to get there, right?
I feel like the terminology being kind of unique to the regulatory world confuses people and puts them in this mindset of this is some additional thing I have to do in my product development lifecycle, when what it really is, defining user needs is what problem are you trying to solve?
Yeah. And who
design influence.
Yeah. Yeah. Who is using this when? And who's the user? Because sometimes the end user isn't your only user, right? Especially in medical device. There's the patient, the clinician, the back of house who's reviewing the data. There's all these different users that have different needs of that product and how it's supposed to work.
100%. And so this right there is not something that is additional work to third in your product development process. This is what a good product manager should do anyways. Who are the stakeholders? What problem are you solving for them? That's what user needs are. And then design inputs, as unfamiliar as the name sounds, is, okay, what is your product going to do to solve all that?
Yeah. Oh, the product needs to work when it's hot out and when it's cold out. Ooh, awesome. Well, we're going to throw it in a thermal chamber at this chamber temperature and this chamber temperature, and it still works in both those. It works, right? It's like it's that translation from how the user expects it to behave to how I always joke, how can an engineer put it on a checklist? I did this thing, therefore I met that need. That is like the simplest translation to go from user need to like a design requirement.
Something that I loved
100%.
Something that I love that you had on your website was you have like a No BS QMS manifesto. It has like 4 key pillars there. Could you dive into that a little bit? I think that was really interesting.
Yeah, the non-BS manifesto was kind of the culmination of, my almost 15 years of experience in the industry, having a lot of the same conversations and noticing that there's a lot of underlying paradigms. Obviously, the content of the conversations change, but like the underlying paradigms, which would lend itself to, an effective, but also an efficient quality process. And so I say effective, meaning you do actually ensure quality and you have a quality product, but efficient as in you do it in the least burdensome manner. And this kind of took me back to the FDA's guidance on, least burdensome principles, which, has been out forever. The FDA at the end of the day has said, things we're telling you, we are trusting you to figure out how to achieve the objective in the least burdensome manner. At the same time, being in the software world, I'm very familiar with the Agile Manifesto and how it's got 4 principles. And so that's how the non-BS Manifesto was born, was marrying the two together.
Oh, that's
and
fun.
So essentially it's got 4 principles, which I think if applied at every organization is going to lead to kind of your best quality outcome, the most efficient quality outcome. So, it was quality over proceduralism. We see that be a problem, and I can deep dive into every single one of them as necessary, but we see that often be the problem with quality departments because it's really easy in a quality position to criticize everyone else for not appreciating quality, but I think often quality brings it upon themselves.
Yeah, no, they sit in their ivory tower and they yell down at everybody. Why can't you make it this detailed? Why can't you document it like this? We need it all in as many, all these things you have to do. And the engineers are sitting there like, yeah, but if we don't ship by next quarter, like we're all out of a job anyways. Like, how do we balance these two needs of the world, right?
Yeah, exactly. In fact, most of the manifesto is mostly a nod to the quality team. It is also something for the cross-functional teams to be aware of because it clarifies their role. But the third and the fourth principles, redundancy over duplication and conciseness over verbosity, those are also mostly kind of principles that need to be applied by the quality department, because redundancy is not the same thing as duplication, and we often see those two get mixed. And adding words to your procedure doesn't make the procedure better.
Right.
In fact, it often makes it more confusing.
Could you dive into that first one for us a little bit more?
Yeah, 100%. So the concept of redundancy, that is a useful risk mitigation approach. So the idea is, failure mode number 1, how do we prevent a hazardous situation or harm? Well, we're going to put in this other redundancy into the design. This also applies to the internal product development processes, right? So from the software development lifecycle, product development process, risk management, you are ultimately designing machines. I often think of a QMS as a product whose users are the internal cross-functional stakeholders. It's just not something we're selling. The clients are internal. And you've got this product with its users designed to achieve a certain objective. The risk management process has an objective. The product development process has an objective. Your post-market surveillance process has an objective. Every single one of these processes have an objective. And when you design that, you look at what are the failures. Most often it's going to be failures of people to do the thing they're assigned, right? So if that fails, what is going to be our safety net? All of this to prevent the ultimate quality issues and making it to the field, right? And so there's value in redundancy in a process. Often I have seen this be incorrectly implemented as duplication of steps in the process without any value add. For example, I'm going to have the same question be asked 3 times in a form or 2 different forms, which are filled out by the same person. If that person is the failure mode,
That's
you're
the
not
same answer.
actually.
Yeah.
It's the same answer, right? You're not actually adding any redundancy to your procedure. You're just adding duplication. And so what happens is not only are you not helping, but also duplication has a cost, because when you've got the same piece of information, spread out around your quality management system, it is only a matter of time before you get misalignment. If people are really good following procedures, you just have added like overhead, the thing they could be updating once, they're now having to update in 3 places.
Yep.
That is the best case scenario. The actual and worst case scenario that happens is they update one, they forget the other 2, someone else takes the one that is not updated, someone takes the one that is updated, you got misalignment, you now got to go figure out what went wrong where. So that is how I differentiate between redundancy versus duplication.
Oh, that's good. And I think one of the things I have seen in how to make good quality systems and good plans is what I call the facilitator bonus. If you're the doer, it's really hard to grade your own homework. It's really hard to come up with a plan to check yourself, right? It's really difficult because for some reason you internalize either. I've seen engineers go both ways. Either they're an absolute focus engineer and they're going to way overkill their quality system. A lot of duplication, a lot of way too down in the weeds, and they won't get the doing done. Or you get the ones that are so excited to do. Their quality system is like, did I do the thing? 1 checkbox. I did the thing. Check. And the whole product's done. And what's really useful is facilitation from an external party. This is why quality consultants, I think, do very, very well in small to medium businesses, right? You shouldn't hire quality internally if you're that small, because you're going to have a really hard time leading yourself to the correct amount of balance because you're too close to the problem. Once you get to a larger organization, you can have someone in quality whose job is no individual contributorship engineering. Their job is only to ensure quality, and they're not really doing quality. They're facilitating quality. They're asking the engineers, how should we protect this? In the right way, that the engineer's not grading their own homework. They're being coached through and giving solutions to quality problems that the quality manager identifies. This is my favorite thing that no one from the outside sees.
No, 100%. And, I think what you're really pointing at there is the concept of independence.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a concept that is explicitly stated in FDA guidances and also standards. There's full-on standards about, in different capacities, whether it's internal auditing of your quality management system or it is testing of the software. It is understood that in order for a verification, evaluation, or assessment to be effective, the person doing it must have a degree of independence from the work.
Right.
At the end of the day, where the redundancy comes in here is that you've got a different brain with a different perspective looking at the objective output of the work versus that exact same brain that created it. It probably already addressed whatever it could find in the development process anyways. If I coded something, I probably already thought of all the defensive coding lines I need to put in there, are the ways I need to validate the input, all of that. I probably already put all that in there. It's a different brain that is going to actually find other stuff and therefore mitigate the overall risk.
Yep. No, and it's such a fun thing that even those that are great at their craft, incredibly good at software or mechanical engineering or electrical engineering, if you've already solved the problem in your head, that's not the way to handle the product or way to handle it so it doesn't break, you overlook that all the time, right? You're never going to break your own prototype. It's hard for you to find ways to break it because your brain steers around those things unconsciously. But man, my team, at the moment they hand me a prototype, whether it's software to go click through or if it's a mechanical or electrical device, I will find a way to break it because I'm not the one that designed it. I'm just going to handle it like a traditional user would. What happens when you hold down these 3 buttons at the same time, right? And why would you ever do that? And then of course it locks something up or resets or whatnot. And you're yep, this is what users are going to do because users will do anything.
I think it's super common as well. Like, so my background started a software company that I ran for a number of years, and even as you're like kind of iterating on like a mobile application we were working with coaches and things like that. I was the best user of all in team sports. I knew how to navigate it perfectly and like sign up and do all the like demos and things like that, and just this is the easiest platform to use in the world, of course, because I literally drew out every single screen that's on it, right? And couldn't see the areas where like the user interface wasn't great. I think that it's just really interesting how that applies so much at the actual like device level as well, for sure.
100%. And it's not just even having two different brains. I have gone through a protocol the same night, maybe 3 times or 4 times, and thought, okay, there's nothing to see here. And the next day, I looked at the same thing and I find a glaring. I'm just like, how did I miss this? I find a glaring mistake that I put in. I'm like, how did I miss this? So even, the same person at different times of the day will look at the same thing differently.
Yeah, no, and we're all human. That's why quality exists, because we actually are all human. We're all going to make small mistakes here and there. On the whole, we mean well. On the whole, we actually do pretty incredible things. But that's why quality exists, why verification, validation exists, to catch the things that you just glossed over, right? You're so busy solving some major problem.
That's a really important point you bring up, actually. I think this is, by the way, a fundamental point I always try to drive in quality conversations is it is really easy in everyday work to have this adversarial feeling towards quality management system people, and also be scared of admitting mistakes.
Right.
Now, the thing is, the reason we decided as a society that quality management systems must exist is because we have acknowledged that humans are incomplete, they have limited bandwidth, and B, make mistakes even when they do know better. And the QMS is the ultimate big picture mitigation for humans. That's what it is. We're trying to proceduralize things, and we're trying to define them, and we're trying to verify what humans do by other humans. And that's the ultimate concept here. And so when someone does make a mistake, they shouldn't be afraid to come forward and say, hey, messed that up.
No, they should run forward.
QMS,
run forward early with the big flashing sign. Say, I screwed this up. Can we help fix this?
Right, because you're not going to get a slap on the wrist if you're in the right culture. Now, obviously, there's poor cultures out there, but in the right QMS culture, we knew you would mess up one day. Like, that's why we designed the system. We understood that everyone here is human and they will make mistakes. And so that's just, accepted as the premise of the quality management system in the first place.
Oh, yeah. And to that point, the one thing it doesn't make any mistakes at all is, of course, AI.
Never.
Right? And
no, this is the fun part, like the brand new world that we're all living in, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because 2 years ago, AI could barely write a cohesive paragraph. Like, it would bring up a lot of good stuff, but it was like, that sounds weird, or that reads weird.
Yeah, we talk about all the time how, like, the connected wave and all the world of like consumer and industrial and things like that is finally making its way over like to the medical device space, and as well as AI. And I know you have a background in that as well. Like, he was curious to pick your brain on like what's happening there, what are you seeing, and how's it being implemented?
100%. So, what makes AI implementation in a safety critical system and medical devices or safety critical system even more tricky is there is, as of now, no straightforward black and white method of verification and inspection at the end of the day. I talked about how big picture QMS mitigates the risk of human failures through a number of things, including inspection and verification. With AI systems, how do you know that this system is gonna work during your test, but also continue to work? With traditional software, we always had the assumption that it is deterministic. And what that meant was, if I design a test in my V&V, after I push this logic to product, it is going to continue to give me that exact same result.
Yeah, for the same inputs, you'll get the same outputs every time.
With AI, though, all bets are off. Like, there is no way, first of all, you can cover all the inputs. And for the most part, how the model's operating, even the people that create the model see as black box, giant statistical machine. And so one of the primary challenges is that because of that, what we're seeing out there is we're starting slow. We're saying, hey, let's focus on the low risk applications where if it fails, the severity of the failure isn't high.
Right.
So what that ends up looking like is things like, first of all, tools that are just not medical devices. So use of AI in operations, product development process, design development process, brainstorming, and making sure that a human's 100% verifying the output. But also when you look at the medical device landscape, for the most part, first of all, there's nothing on the generative AI side of things cleared because the FDA is still trying to figure out if they want to allow it, how they would allow it. Yeah, it's a big open question of how do you regulate a generative AI product. Same with continuous learning. How do I regulate a continuously learning model? So none of that has been cleared. For the most part, what's been cleared in the higher risk setting of a medical device has been a niche of narrow task, machine learning model. For example, most of them are in radiology for image processing, identified features.
Pattern recognition. Hey, can you see something that you think doesn't belong here? And then we'll show it to a person. And that's still your validation at the end of the day is we're going to show this one to a person. Right. Yeah. Now, the thing is, the problem is it might miss some, it might produce false negatives, but the false positives are no big deal. It's the how many false negatives does it work? So if I can tune my machine learning model to just be more sensitive than it could be, that's, the safer side to fail on there, right? And then you just got to show it a bunch of data and see how often it produces a false negative outcome, which is really negative, right, for the user. False positives suck from a process perspective, but they're not that bad for the actual patient.
Sure. Well, and also depends on how you define positive and negative. But I think the other problem we're having is we don't even know how to define positive and negative, like concretely with some of this stuff. We're having to be statistical. We're having to be subjective. And whatever I characterize in my test environment as the false positive, false negative, does it actually carry over to the real world? And so, a lot of the FDA guidance and all that is to address that question of make sure whatever training data you had represents the real world. We have yet to be convinced that this is safely enough. We're still trying to figure that out based on the data we're getting.
Oh, that's so interesting. So what are you counseling startups that are looking to leverage AI in the regulated space right now? Like, how do you counsel them to move forward? How do they launch their products today?
Well, honestly, with everything QMS, and AI is no exception, I started with like common sense and good engineering practices. I'm like, how do you know this thing's actually going to work, right? And if you actually deep dive enough into that, you will reverse engineer every single GMLP that the FDA has, the good machine learning practices. Yeah. Because ultimately, that's how they came into existence in the first place. However, the very first question is like data. I mean, that's basically where, from a pure quality standpoint and functionality standpoint, the biggest challenge of any machine learning application out there, Gen AI or otherwise, is data. What is your training data? What is your model? And can you give me provenance for your data? Where'd you get it? How do you know it's like, representative of your actual, real world?
Right. And then have you classified your data correctly? Right. If you're feeding it, I think this is a positive outcome or I think this is a negative outcome data set, how are you sure that data has been, classified correctly by the humans that did it? Right? How much error are you putting in your model because you're feeding it the wrong, labels on certain data sets you're feeding it? We've got a client that's not even in the medical space right now, but in a detection space is what I'll call it. And they're trying to find signal and noise in an incredibly noisy environment. And they're like, we want to AI this. Like, well, you just need to feed it a lot of examples of the thing, but the event they're trying to detect is incredibly expensive to create. So it's going to be super hard to get enough data to train that model.
Well, but also these examples you're feeding, you got to be representative, right? Because it's really easy to overfit a model. Everybody can do it, right? You can just, pick a subset of the reality, and that's where I have data, and I'm just going to feed it that, and then, use that to also do your verification validation. And next thing you know, you've got this amazing result because you just overfit the model to your training data and pat yourself on the back. I've got a product, and the next thing you know, you're out there in the real world, and you're miserable.
Right, your data accuracies are nowhere near what they were in the lab.
Exactly, 100%. And so, that's the other, upfront design assurance activity you can do, like the assessment of, hey, is this actually representative?
Oh, that's so good. No, that is always such hard stuff to do.
And can you explain to us a little bit around like the QMS culture versus mandate? I thought that was really interesting as well.
Oh yeah, that's the principle we missed of the No BS manifesto. Yeah, so I believe the single most important lever one can pull is the culture in an organization to just make everything go smoothly. To me, what culture represents is everyone being aligned on what quality means to them, to that organization, and also what role they particularly play in achieving that.
Mhm.
Because once you get there, you don't need somebody looking over your shoulder. You don't need everyone catching you for you to just identify the things you need to do. And in fact, all functions are working together. You've got non-quality functions coming to quality with ideas on improving quality. You've got quality cutting fat from the QMS where it's not necessary because they identify it that way. And the opposite of that would be what we unfortunately see too often, which is quality is a bunch of procedures and checklists mandated on people that they just got to follow without them understanding what the intent and objective is. Even if the objective is there and there is an actual intent that these processes and checklists are meant to accomplish.
Right.
When people do not understand the why, they do a poor job even filling out a checklist.
Correct. Or they fill it out without the right intent, and they're missing the actual meaning of the words. They're just reading the words and interpreting them however they do that day, right? And I think this goes back down to that culture conversation we touched on earlier, is the fear of failure can create very toxic quality like systems and cultures, right? If you have that engineer that's afraid to have done design work that's going to fail a quality check, they're going to engineer their test to not fail their work, not engineer their work to not fail what the test is actually trying to go find.
Exactly. 100%. And so, that is kind of what the principle of culture versus mandate was pointing at, which is like when you were going about doing trainings, when you're going about building your quality management system, you got to focus on, making sure you're building the culture. Everybody's on the same page. I mean, I've shared examples of this before where, I've been in an environment where I had software engineers pushing product management for having approved requirements, and they either refused to code if requirements weren't clarified. And on the other hand, I've had environments where, despite the best procedures being released, software engineers push to production without a change order.
Right.
And so it's the two extremes. Obviously, most companies fall somewhere in between, but the two extremes of appreciation for quality, having a culture that basically understands what the quality is supposed to look like.
No, and it's I'm playing the engineer in this game. I'm going to play on the quality system because it will save me from being embarrassed later in production, right? I want to be embarrassed here in front of my friends that I made a small and silly mistake, and they're going to help me fix it. Versus I made a small silly mistake, and that person in the MRI machine no longer exists, right? Some control loop went out of control or something broke horribly. Like there are those moments that are like not recoverable amounts of embarrassment or shame. And then there are the ones that, if you build a great culture, like you laugh when you find the bug that you made, or your buddy finds the bug that you made because he was the one doing your code review as it should be done, right? One of those things like don't review your own code. And one of the things like that healthy culture actually helps just fix all the problems before they get out in the world.
100%. And even if like in the real world, you don't have a human harm cost to your failure, just the cost of fixing whatever issue there is to get the product functional again is an order of magnitude greater post-market than it is like pre-market.
Oh yeah, the compound interest on technical debt really hurts.
It does. And it gets to the point, I mean, I've seen it over and over again. People, in the interest of product roadmap, they, forego working on technical debt. And then they just get to a point where you fix one thing, something else breaks, you take twice as long for a standard feature from the roadmap because of poor architecture. And they do this thing where there's like throw all hands up and they're like, I don't know, 5 sprints just tech debt.
Yeah.
One of the last questions I want to ask is we touched on it a moment ago, and like how it's pretty difficult, if not impossible, to implement AI into some of these like products and things like that. But how do you foresee the FDA like shifting when it comes to AI and how it's implemented, either on the device side or on like the product side?
So, we're living in times when the FDA has gone through a lot of changes at many levels. I will say, though, one thing that I've seen be kind of a continuous thread in the FDA's thinking has been this willingness to come up with 21st century regulatory frameworks that support innovation with these new technologies, while they still have the hard job of ensuring public safety, right, with these medical devices that go out there. And so I've seen the willingness on behalf of the agency to try out new regulatory things. The advisory committees that are public-private partnerships, they actually now have one on generative AI. They had a meeting a few months back trying to get feedback from the industry. Things like the PCCP guidance, the predetermined change control guidance, these are all, at the end of the day, signs of the FDA's willingness and active investment in new regulatory frameworks that are best for new technologies. Obviously, you could apply old regulatory frameworks to new technologies. It just ends up being a round peg in a square hole kind of a situation.
With enough time, effort, and energy, you can fit them in together, but that's time, effort, energy.
Yes, right? Exactly. It's a waste. You either compromise on the patient safety aspect of this, or you compromise on the streamline aspect of this, right? So when I look at what the FDA has been doing, I'm actually pretty optimistic. We also saw the announcement of them rolling out AI internally to streamline their own operations. They talked about the model called ELSA. They're trying to use that for streamlining reviews, but also streamlining some of their internal operations. It all points to the right direction. I think the success is going to come down to the quality of execution, and that remains to be seen. I think we're in a good place for AI-enabled devices, though.
Oh, I agree. And I think the fascinating thing I see coming down the pipeline from like I'll call it not, there's deep tech that's like forever in the future, and I'm calling it near tech. It's not here yet, but it's coming, is using AI and machine learning to test AI and machine learning that weren't developed together, right? You use one to test the other, and you can throw enough stats against a new model or whatever that model's purpose is if you can have another model exercise it, right? Like you have a natural language LLM, just say a bunch of stuff to your new medical model that is supposed to answer questions about a certain thing, and find out how many times the natural language model on the other side gets harmful data. And you ask it, hey, tell me every time you think you hear harmful data from the new AI system, right? Ones that would be, not congruent with what you think is correct. And statistically, if they all line up that it most of the time answers safely, that might be the data set. Because you can, it's you either have lots of data of, okay quality, or you need a little bit of data of incredible quality. Well, it's getting to be, we can now have lots of data of okay quality, and stats will eventually play themselves out.
Yeah, 100%. This AI versus AI model has been proposed. I have not yet seen it be used in a medical device product that is cleared. I'm sure we will, because I think there's a lot of value in just including this in the design assurance chain. Ultimately, the amount of testing an AI agent can do is going to be much bigger, but also much different than what a human tester can do.
Right.
What used to be humans testing humans is now AI testing AI. Everybody, this is the Hardtech Podcast. I'm your host, DeAndre Harakas, my co-host, Grant Chapman.
Take care, everybody.
Ashkon, thank you so much for being on with us.
Thank you.